Christians. I had a post to which this person responded, and the verse was saying that Jesus Christ never went to hell. When he died on the cross, he did not go to hell. His body went into the grave, and the grave is often translated with the English word hell. So when the Bible makes any reference to Christ being in hell, it is talking about his body being in the grave. We know this, first of all, because most of us know what the grave is. But we also know from Luke 23 that Jesus Christ, when he died on the cross, he told the thief on the cross that he would be with him in paradise that very day. And he also said that in Luke 23 that he commended his spirit up to heaven, up to God. And he said he commended his spirit into God's hands. Now, I don't know how many different proofs you need to see that Christ himself never went into hell. But my friend here says that this brother, meaning me, is misinformed, which I'm not. And then he says, it might be good to go to a seminary and get properly biblically educated. My friend, here's what I will say. Your problem is probably that you went to seminary and got properly biblically educated, which is why you don't know what you're talking about. We can discuss this anytime you're ready, and this is easily proven. Just say the word. Be provoked and be persuaded.
Let me add to what my man is saying here. So the Bible provocateur is a Christian, or at least a Bible believer, a follower of Jesus. That's why I call him a Christian, who tries to correct other Christians on their teachings and misunderstandings within the Bible. Now, when he first brought up this subject matter, I thought that he would go into a little bit more deeper historical revelations as far as how people came up with this doctrine of Jesus going into hell and preaching to the sinners or the righteous of the Old Testament people, so that they can then rise in heaven. But if that was true, exactly like he pointed out, that would have been a contradiction, and would be a contradiction within the Bible if this idea was true. So how did this idea come about? Well, most historians think that the idea of Jesus going into the grave, going into hell, and speaking to the righteous who were in hell from the Old Testament and bringing them up to heaven occurred somewhere between the 2nd century CE, but was more solidified in the 5th century CE, because none of the creeds, and there were many creeds, there was the Nicene Creed, there's the Nicosean Creed, there's a bunch of different creeds that were spoken of and done throughout the early Christian church and into the creation of the Roman church. But it's not really until you get the Creed of the Apostles in and around 411 CE that you begin to see this idea and of Jesus going in and speaking and getting the righteous out of hell who were in the Old Testament. As a matter of fact, if you read the creed itself, it says that explicitly, but at the end of that creed, it talks about the Universal Catholic Church as well. So you know who created this doctrine, and this doctrine did not fall away when Martin Luther and John Calvin and others separated themselves from the Catholic Church, and it still remained a part of Protestant doctrine as well as part of Catholic doctrine. But there is a part of it that could be looked upon as a contradiction within the Bible, because you have to ask the question, where did these early church fathers get the idea for the Apostles' Creed? Well, when you look at 2 Peter, I think the 2nd chapter, and when you look at Ephesians, I know Ephesians is the 2nd chapter, so 2 Peter may be a different chapter. Both of those chapters allude to the idea that once Jesus came off the cross, that his soul, his spirit, descended into the grave, into Hades. And it doesn't say anything about preaching to the people in hell at the time frame. It doesn't say that he brought the righteous up. This is what they extrapolated from. This is what they interpreted from these writings in Ephesians and the writings in 2 Peter. Now, most historians will also tell you that the writings of 2 Peter was definitely not written by Paul. So it wasn't written by anyone who even knew an eyewitness. This would have been written more likely by one of the disciples of Paul, but given Paul as the author. Ephesians is a little bit more tricky because Ephesians was more than likely written during the time frame of Paul supposedly being incarcerated in Rome, and possibly could have been written by Paul. But there are some scholars out there who don't think that even Ephesians was written by Paul, but Ephesians was written by, a disciple of Paul. Now, 2 Peter was most likely written somewhere between 60 and 100 CE. So there's a lot of room for that one to not have been written by Paul, whereas Ephesians doesn't have as much room, since it is believed that it is written between 60 and 67 CE. So there is the possibility that it was written by Paul, but like I said, some scholars think that it wasn't actually written by Paul either. But in either case, these accounts are later interpretations and later extrapolations as to what they thought possibly could have happened, but was not written by anyone who possibly could have been an eyewitness. And no one could have been an eyewitness because no one has been to hell and back. No one. So no one could have witnessed Jesus going down there, and there is no writings in any other gospel or epistles where Jesus comes to the people and say, hey, when I was on the grave and 3 days had went by, it really wasn't 3 days, but 3 days had went by, I went down the hill and I talked to, all the people who was in Abraham's bosom, and I talked to all the people who were in hell, and I told them who I was, and I brought them back up to heaven. But if that was the case, like my man said here, it would be a contradiction to what is written in Luke. And even though Luke was not a first-hand account, but Luke was a disciple of Peter, and Luke was writing based on what he was told. But according to Luke, on that very day that Jesus supposedly died, he told the thieves, you will be in heaven with me as well. So if you're going to be there on that day, then how does he have time to go spend that time in hell? You see what I'm saying? It's a contradiction. Now, I understand the Bible provocateur. He still believes in the Bible, and that's fine. You can believe whatever you want to believe, but it's contradictions like that, and then doctrinal issues that formulated the belief in Christianity that gave me pause and led me to realize that this book is just mythos that is written in order for people to feel good and to control the people. But tell me, what do you guys think? Always remember, you have to free yourself to be yourself, because your greatness is non-negotiable. Good journey, good vibrations.